I know it's going to be a 10-second delay, so that's what I'm
I turned my phone off. It's my alarm to remind me I'm supposed to
ready
be
to go,
here.
sir.
All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Those who are behind me, we appreciate you being here. Our purpose here tonight in the next 30 minutes is to discuss the dredging project there on Lambs Creek. More specifically to the letter that was written several weeks ago. That letter has, I believe, been on our website for some time, so I hope everybody had an opportunity to read that. Just some comments from me to get started, and then we can, Carrie, if it's all right, we'll just move to you and go around the table until we, is Bud with us, by the way?
He should be with us via phone.
Okay, all right. There was an email that I got today, actually this morning, and I just want to read part of this to the group behind me and to council. Find out where the period is. This is supposedly a quote. I only learned of this opportunity today, and I've heard City Council may be opposed to the dredging of the project. I have spoken to my neighbors regarding this project, and some of them do not support it. Council may be opposed to the dredging project because, quote, that you indicated that the property owners on Lambs Creek did not support the project. It did not come from me. I don't know where that came from, but it did not come from me. I have been dealing with emails and phone calls. There are several people behind me right now that I've talked to and brought them up to date on every move that this council has made regarding this project. So I don't know where that came from. It's unfortunate that it's in there, but I want to get that out of the way first. These are my reasons for concerns, Lambs Creek dredging project, and then Carrie, after I get finished, if you would take it from there. First concern is if the city moves forward with this project, we'll be setting an expectation that the city will also dredge other areas in the city. In this case, York County has offered to take the lead on engineering and contract procurement and also the management of the project. For other future projects, the city would need to add staff and would also need to contract for project-related services. That's not only a concern of mine, that is a concern of most of council, and it is also the some of the folks behind me have that same feeling. How would the project be funded? No member of council has indicated they support using general budget funds for the project. Several members of council have also expressed they do not support the special tax district or the concept or the proposed participation threshold. Future grant funding concern, I did have a conversation with a gentleman from that is on Lambs Creek this afternoon. He did indicate that a family member did have some, what was actually a grant writer, and would certainly be on the lookout for a grant that may help this situation. I have not talked to that lady. I don't think anybody on council's talked to her either, so I'll wait to hear from her. There are no grants that the staff is aware of to pay for this project, and should York County identify a grant which would pay for all the project expenses, then we would certainly be open to restarting discussions for the joint project. One thing that I am totally against, and I think council, is that all right? I think council will discuss this further tonight, but we are having a budget presentation tonight. We've got some capital projects that are backed up for years that we need to get moving on these things, and they benefit, those projects benefit everyone in this community. So I would absolutely be opposed to spending our capital project money on a dredging project. And with that said, Carrie, we'll go to you, and then we'll go around the table and we will be finished with that. Again, our action,
Gene,
on
can you
the
get this
agenda
puppy dog
tonight-
so you don't start barking now?
is that Bud?
That's Bud.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Bud, did you want to say something?
No, Gordon, I'll wait my turn, thank you.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, Carrie.
Well, I'm not opposed to dredging, but I am opposed to city funding dredging. We've got 87 miles of shoreline. We have that in our economic development folders that we brag about. And if we started a dredging project for 87 miles, that would take, I suspect, probably billions of dollars. And there have been some good suggestions about grant funding and things like that, which I think if the people that want this, we get together and see if they can come up with funding and hire a private contractor, I think that would be, I would support that.
Okay, Keith?
Oh, okay, thank you. Hope I'm being heard. I started looking at it from the perspective, at-home conversations of what is the city supposed to do? What is our function as a government? And having looked at the budget things in last year's, I came across this one line that says, "The city of Poquoson provides a full range of services, including police and fire protection, the maintenance of highways, streets, and other infrastructure, recreational activities, library services, community development activities, and cultural events. The city also owns and maintains sewage facilities, contracts for trash pickup and disposal, recycling, landscaping, and bulky items, owns and operates a city pool, and manages various paid recreational activities." I had tried to figure out where dredging of a creek would fall in there, and I basically could not find it to myself. So I'm just going, we do all that for 12,500 people, what we got here. On the budget, we have about $40 million, and this project would take about $2 million, which, however it's funded, and I agree with what you put down when you were talking about the funding aspect of it. So I started shaking my head. The things that come to light that not everybody really seems to think about when they do this was what I call other issues, is that it'll be 46 months based on this plan that we've been looking at from the time we say go. Costs do not include driveway channels. Those are the channels that are basically from the dock into the main channel that will be dredged. These will not be combined with any channel dredging. In other words, we won't have a contractor do channel dredging. That'll be something that comes after the channel is dredged, if it dredged at all. The current plan presumes a close-by dewatering area, which we don't know if that's going to exist, which will save millions of dollars according to the reports I read. Other issues, you mentioned as a precedent, any other waterway considering a similar project will have to pay for the engineering fees that York County is nicely providing in this particular case. We did receive an email this afternoon that had a presentation in it that talked about environmental impacts and improvements that would be good for us. So I started thinking, having read that over a couple hours and trying to figure out what all it meant, but I thought, maybe we should be looking at this dredging project from the environmental perspective rather than recreational, because everything we've read so far is purely recreational. And if so, what kind or type of dredging is best for that? Would it satisfy both purposes, and at what cost? So if we looked at it from the environmental perspective, as that presentation said, was pushing for, it may be different than what it would be for recreational. It may be completely, less expensive, may not be as deep, maybe wider perhaps, or whatever. No one's ever looked at the environmental impact of that. Will dredging have any impact on wildlife? Will not dredging have any impact on wildlife? In perspective of what we're looking at and seeing those photos, which I've been down there and looked at it real time anyway. In 2014, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board looked at a possible kayak launch at Amory's Wharf. It would have had to be placed out 399 feet from the shore due to the shallow water depth caused by sediment buildup. So it's not just sediment buildup that Harry was referring to at that particular creek. It's all around Poquoson, so no easy solution there. I have no real problem with the dredging either. I do have a problem with 12,450 people paying for it for the benefit of some others. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Sharon?
So I just wanted to acknowledge some of the concerns of the citizens, because I think that's important. You know, some of the things that I've heard is, you know, it's not gonna just be this one. Eventually, you know, will all our creeks start drying up, getting silt filled? People in Poquoson can't have boats. Now, that might be 20, 30, 40 years long after we're not on council anymore. But I think it's something that eventually the city's going to have to face, because if that's our draw and that starts going away, you know, that, like you talked about, an environmental thing, you know, just something to think about for the future. York County is willing to pay part of this, which could be the only project that we ever get help with. And from an environmental perspective, you know, I think if over time, Poquoson does have to start looking at our waterways are getting dried up and we have to do something to help it, can we meet our TMDL credits? We have to spend money to meet those, I'm assuming, right, Randy, in some capacity sometimes?
Yes.
The TMDL, as council is aware, we're utilizing the credits available from the HRSD SWIFT program
Okay,
to meet our TMDL obligations,
okay, all right,
as are the other jurisdictions in our region.
okay. So that was my question, is could any future dredging, if it came up, be used to meet those? But if we're already meeting them, that's what I'm hearing you say.
That's correct as it relates to TMDL, but the underlying issue, which it could still potentially additionally help.
Additional help that, okay. And the other thing that I've heard from citizens is, yes, doing a project like this would not benefit others, but improving the schools doesn't benefit me. I don't have any children in the schools, neither do the playgrounds, neither, you know, there's lots of other projects that are done for the benefit of citizens that not all citizens benefit from. So I just wanted to recognize that those are some of the concerns of citizens. I had written down some of the same things that some of my fellow council members have said. Personally, I don't have an issue with the letter because the letter doesn't commit us to anything. I mean, as I read it, it says that we will survey citizens to find out what their feelings are on a special tax district. I would not want to impose a special tax district unless the majority of people were like, if the majority of people in Lambs Creek said, yes, we want this, and we are willing to pay, or at least we're willing to find out how much it would cost as a special tax district, then, you know, the people have spoken. If they're not, then they're not. So I don't necessarily have a problem sending the letter forward unless I'm reading it wrong. It basically just says we would do a survey to see if our citizens are interested or not, which I think is an important piece of information to know, because I know from being on the other side of city council, not everybody comes out and speaks. There's lots of people that, for whatever reason, don't choose to come here or don't send an email, and so always the few people that come here aren't necessarily the representation of the whole. I would like to know what the people on Lambs Creek feel like, because if it comes back and the majority, I mean, we've been told that 80% are in favor of it, but we don't know that. Maybe that's true. Maybe we do a survey and it comes back and we find out only 20% are, and then we can say, look, we've gotten the information, our citizens, only 20% in favor, we can't, you know, York County, we're out, totally. We don't even want you to include us anymore. So for me, I think that's an important piece of information for us to know, but I am not in favor of a financial burden on this city with all the capital projects that we have. I think it would be wonderful if we could get grant money to do this. So in my opinion, unless we could get grant money that didn't burden the citizens, because we do have a lot of capital projects, police station, I mean, just a lot of things that need to be done in the city, that would benefit the majority of citizens. So unless the people who this impacts would be open to a special tax district, or we can find grant funding, that I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of it. But I am in favor of sending the letter forward, and I am in favor of finding out for sure what everybody in Lambs Creek feels about a special tax district, so that we know, yes, they want it, or no, they don't, for certain, and can make decisions based on that.
Okay, Dave?
Thank you, Gordon.
Yes, sir.
Throughout most of my lifetime, going back to the 1970s, I've been up and down most of the creeks, the vast majority of them, I would say, around this peninsula that we call home at one time or another. And I can speak from personal experience that most of the vast majority of those creeks that I've been up and down, the sand to be dredged, and that's not a new concept. That goes back to my earliest recollections in the 1970s. So if we were to dredge Lambs Creek, just to reinforce previous comments, it would obligate future city councils with no knowledge whatsoever of what future circumstances may be to dredge whatever other creeks in the coast or the outside shore of down Griffin's Beach, most anywhere you want to go. Also, the city of Poquoson does not own the bottom of Lambs Creek or any of the other waterways, nor does it own the water that flows through those things. So my position on this all along, while I certainly acknowledge the existence of the problem, I do not believe that the city is responsible for dredging the creek.
Okay, Buddy?
I don't support this dredging for several reasons. One is, the contractor's gonna wanna get paid as soon as he's done. And a special tax district is gonna take years to recoup the money. So we are using taxpayer money to fund this thing that don't live anywhere near Lambs Creek, and I think that's totally wrong. The other thing is we're setting a precedent for future councils. This dredge is not gonna last forever. It's gonna have to be redone. And there are 3 man-made canals where I live that are gonna silt in, and that's only a small part of what we have in the whole city of Poquoson. So we're really setting a dangerous precedent that could cost this city a lot of money. The other thing is, you go dredge a deep canal or deep channel in Lambs Creek, we don't know how deep some of those pier pilings were driven, and all that silt that's around those pilings is gonna go right to that hole we create. And so we run the risk of piers falling in, and who's gonna pay for that? We're gonna be responsible for it. So no, I don't support it at all.
Okay. Mr. Southall?
Yes, sir. Gordon, I received a copy of the presentation that I believe it was Jenny Kristen presented to us for us to look at, and I have to admit that I really didn't understand the view graph presentation all that well. It looked like it talked about environment. Relative to the project, I am concerned about how it really gets paid for. If it was all grant money, then I'd be willing to maybe to listen to what they wanted to do after a really good environmental study. Because when you do something to drain water, and that presentation talked more about drainage than anything else, at least my interpretation of it was that, when you do things to increase drain water back to the river, it also lets water in much faster. And I would like to know whether an environmental impact statement would say that would cause more flooding in the city. And so I would want that to be looked at very carefully with the engineering stuff. The other thing is the proposal that we had before us to be talked about tonight proposed a special tax district. And I am opposed to a special tax district because you levy taxes on people who really don't want it, might not want to use it, and in some cases there are people who just plain can't afford it. And I'm not interested in running the first person out of the home because we raised their taxes too high. And so as it stands, I'm not interested in a special tax district to pay for it. If they get a grant or something to totally pay for it, then I'll be willing to listen to it after a thorough environmental study to make certain that we don't create more problems than we solve. One other issue is that when we had people come talk to us before, everyone talked about their problem was that their boats hit the bottom in the mud of their piers. And the dredging doesn't go to the pier, so in order for them to really utilize the channels, they would have to get a private dredge all their own, all the way out to the channels. Okay? And we'd be paying tax and forcing people to pay taxes for something that many of them still couldn't use in any case.
Okay, Bud, thank you. Any other
Yes, sir.
comments? Any other comments?
I have one.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Bud.
Sorry, okay. I remember back on 9th of August, a gentleman spoke to us about Lambs Creek. He made a comment when, in the quote here, when that creek was built, it was hand dug to 6 feet, and it was put there for a reason. It was put there to drain neighborhoods because we're taking away wetlands, and so we have to mitigate somehow. Now, and I asked the question then, are any lawns, any yards being flooded, are houses being flooded because of this problem? If so, I'd be the first one to get out with a shovel and help dig it. But if there's not a problem right now, and we don't foresee it being a problem, I have a problem supporting it. I have no problem with the letter. I like the fact that we were discussing the issue, and there's maybe things that I don't know that can come to light with the discussion with York County. But right now, I'm not really in favor of it.
Okay, all right. Kerry, I'm sorry.
I was just going to comment about the number of people that would support it. Since we don't know the total cost, there are a lot of people that would support it at 2 cents that would not support it at a quarter or 50 cents. And so until we can get a total cost, I don't think we can tell our people much about how much a special tax district would add to their tax bill.
Okay, other comments? Okay, just for the folks that are behind me, we do appreciate you being here, and we're not going to set a clock on you. I'm looking forward to those that want to speak under audience for visitors. That's going to be the second item on our agenda, and just to reiterate, this vote that we're going to take tonight has to do only with whether or not we send this letter that Kerry just mentioned and Keith has mentioned, Jana mentioned it, whether or not we send that letter, forward that on to York County. So that, we're not deciding dredging or not dredging, we're deciding whether or not we want to send the letter to York County for their consideration. If the letter, in fact, does make its way to York County, then we would expect that York County would respond to us, as Randy and I, we spoke with those folks in York County, and they would respond to us as to what the next step might be. I'm not going to support the letter, even though I played a role in drafting it. I'm hoping tonight that we get a lot of input from the folks in the audience. I know there's a lot of things that I'm not aware of. I could give you a total of how many people have told me they're not interested in the new tax district, how many people just flat don't want the dredging. The only survey that I've seen was done by a gentleman who lives in York County. We've not done one, nor has York County done one that I'm aware of. So what we will do is we'll just discontinue the work session unless there are other comments, and we'll listen to the folks that live in that area that are concerned about this one way or the other, and what steps we may take from there. Okay? How about over that? Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Before you go, I want to tell you that I hear you clearly. I did not hear everyone really clearly. So if people talk tonight, would you ask them to speak clearly into the microphones? The connection is really not the best.
Okay, good point.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ours might have been off. Should be green light.
Yeah, green light should be on.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. All right, good evening, everyone. Again, if you would stand, please. Our Councilwoman Andrews will lead us in our pledge, she will give our invocation, and then she will lead us in our pledge.
Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to be here. We are grateful for the opportunity that each of us have to serve and make decisions for the city and for our citizens. We are beyond grateful for our city employees that work hard to keep the city running, and our teachers who work tirelessly to teach our children, for our firefighters and policemen who on any given day can be risking their life in their jobs, and recognize that for the hard work that these people do, our budget constrains us, and they are deserving of much more than we are capable of giving them for their service. We are grateful for our military and for the service that they give, who also, put their life on the line for our country's freedom. We ask you to bless not only them, but their families who support them. Again, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to serve in this capacity, and ask that you please always bless us with wisdom and guidance and the ability to hear our citizens and serve them in the best way possible. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right. First item on our agenda tonight will be our audience for visitors. And if there's anyone in the audience that has not filled out one of these, so that you can speak, please just raise your hand and someone will get you one so you can fill it out. Okay, so we'll start. Yes.
A couple of them got the hand up.
Okay. Okay, while they're doing that, Faye Wimmer, please. And if everyone would just pull the mic really close to you. We've got a member of council that is not with us, but he's kind of in the room. Faye?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Faye Wimmer. I live at 141 Emmaus Road. And first of all, I would like to thank y'all personally for all you do to make it safe for us, for the really nice firemen and the wonderful first aid that comes by and picks you up when you can't help yourself, to get to the hospital, and for taking care of the kids. But what I don't understand is why I live on the creek. I call it a creek because that's what it is right now. And we pay 1% higher taxes than the people across the street. And I always thought that was to keep the creek up so the fish could keep coming in and me catching them. And the crabs coming in. Now we get no crabs, we get no fish. All we get is mud. And it is really, really bad. And we take the boat out, we have to go out a couple of hours before high tide, and you better make sure you back in before it gets low, because you're gonna be spending the night out there hunting. And so that's what we try to do. And another thought is, some places I've been told that if they will dredge their creeks and their canals, when we get like a hurricane, the water's got a place to go, and we won't lose as many houses as we lose and spend as much money repairing people's homes. And so that's another thought. But we're really bad. I gave you some pictures of what it's
Yes,
like,
ma'am.
And we pay taxes, we pay the extra money for the creek, and hey, if I can go fishing, I'm all right with it. But if I can't, I'm not happy. I just go out and buy my fish and eat them in the restaurant. But anyway, and then we pay taxes on the boat. So if we can't go fishing, we just sell the boat, and then there's tax money lost that we need to keep the firemen going and everything else. I mean, we gotta stick together and look out for each other. I mean, you know, and trust God, and that's what we have to do. And right now, I am trusting God that this creek is going to be fixed to where the fish can come in and the crab can come back, you know, and we can go fishing and enjoy life. The few years we've got left. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye.
Continue keeping up your good work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is it Dana or Dana Light?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dana Light. I live at 102 Freemore Drive. And I've lived in Poquoson since 1982. I started out on Messick Road and moved to Freemore 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I can tell a difference now from then in the depth of the water. The little boat ramp down the street from 2 houses down, I used to be able to bring, if I had trouble with my boat, I could bring it up there. Now it's impossible. I can't do it. And I bought a smaller boat, a 20-foot Grady, that, you know, it's not a real deep V, so, you know, I can get in and out the best I can during, you know, the tides, and I may have 4 or 5 hours. So, you know, I know that the deal is that, well, there's lots of creeks in Poquoson and there's lots of dredging to be done. But, you know, if we have York County that's willing to help with our creek, and it seems like from what I've read, they are really, seems like they care about doing it and on their side. So I at least think we should do the letter because, you know, you might not ever get the opportunity again to do it as cheaply. I realize that, you know, the rest of Poquoson that doesn't live on the water, I realize, you know, they don't have an obligation to pay for us that live on the water and to dredge our creeks. And I'm willing to pay my share. You know, if it comes down to, I think the city, I would like for them to do their part and at least, you know, doing the letter, looking into it, and go from there. You know, I realize that if it ever came to it, it would be the main creek that would be dredged. Hopefully we can get grants. I don't know if we have to hire someone special for that or not. But it just seems to me like the city of Poquoson, if they were to start anywhere with this problem, would be with Lamb's Creek. So, you know, I do ask that we do the letter. Okay?
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jim Weltroth, am I close?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Jim Welderoth. I live at 300 Chinkapin Orchard. What I'd like to do is summarize from notes that I've prepared, and then I'd also like to address some of the issues that I heard from the working group meeting. I'd like to start out by summarizing what's happened over the last 47 years. It was brought up in a working group meeting that Lamb's Creek, where I live on, was originally dredged in 1975. It was supposedly 6 feet deep. Some homeowners on there had sailboats over 40 feet long. So it was a sizable dredge, and it provided a lot of good boating capability for a number of years. However, It silted in tremendously, and I saw on your package that you just sent out that you've got some of the pictures. I've got other pictures of Poquoson in York County where it's even worse at low tides, where there's no water in the creek, especially the ancillary channels. In 1995, Mr. Kozak was a resident of Old Port Cove in York County. He worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to put together a dredging plan. To my knowledge, it did not include Poquoson or York County, and did not proceed much beyond the engineering drawing phase of that program, and made some initial contacts with people between Westover and Chinkapin Orchard, people that live along that section of the creek. I retired from the Air Force in 1997. I decided to give up flying and get into boating. So I bought property on Lambs Creek, bought my first boat, built a boathouse, and enjoyed boating on the Poquoson River and neighboring rivers for the next 3 or 4 years. Then we decided we wanted to go out on the bay, so I had to buy a bigger boat, a bay boat. That one, I made a mistake, because I was new to boating. I got one with an inboard outboard, and I was limited by how much I could raise the prop to avoid the silt that was already building up. So after about 3 years, I had to get rid of that and trade up for an outboard boat. And that lasted for about 10 years. It had a much shallower draft, even though it was an ocean-going boat. And then it started silting in. I had to take that boat over to Dare Marina for 2 years and store it over there. And then 3 years ago, I sold the boat because it just wasn't economical to keep running it. It wasn't convenient for me. In the early 2000s, on my section of Lamb Creek, there were 13 boats on boat lifts in that creek. Today, there's 3. And the reason is because they can't use the creek except for about an hour or 2 during daylight, during high tide. And you'll probably hear about that tonight. In 2012, I volunteered and formed an ad hoc committee. It was called the Lambs Creek Revitalization Committee. We had our first meeting right down the hall in the Poquoson Library. We had about 18 people show up. We put together a mission statement. We put together the survey sheets that you've referenced, and we started canvassing all the neighborhoods along Lambs Creek, both in York County and in Poquoson. And we got good response. One of the questions was, how much is it going to cost me? We didn't know then. We still don't know today, because the data we have is from back in 1995, the Army Corps of Engineers. There's been a lot more silting in. Some of the ancillary channels may or may not get dredged. We have to talk to homeowners to decide that. One of the things that was brought up on the working group meeting is the ancillary channels aren't part of the dredge, and they are part of the dredge that York County funded and put together. And there's 8 of them, 3 on York County side and 5 on Poquoson side. In the mid-15s, I worked with Anna Drake up at York County and worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to update their dredging plan, find spoil sites. There's a spoil site in Poquoson side and a spoil site on the York County side. And I also communicated and met with owners and residents along various other dredging projects, including Wormley Creek, Hampton River, Lynn Haven, and Lafayette Rivers in Norfolk. So I've got background information on how those dredges came about and what the issues they came up with and how they solved it. And they solved them in different ways, and they funded them with different sources of money. So that's something you might want to consider. In 2015, York County took the dredging project to Mayor Hunt, who decided it wasn't time to dredge any creeks in Poquoson. So that was a blanket statement. The revitalization of Lambs Creek was put on hold until 2021, when it was started to making contact again with new homeowners. In that 2015 to 2021, there's been 30 to 40 new homeowners on both sides of the creek move in. Because of the pandemic, the committee didn't want to go out and interview these people. So we just kind of spent that time in hiatus, and then in 2021, we started up again. In January of this year, I submitted the contact information that the mayor referenced that my committee did back in 2015 timeframe, and we've updated it some with the new homeowners. And we provided that to the mayor back in January. To date, I've got about 85 people on an email list, and I'm getting, every time I send an update on what the status of this dredge is, I always get tens and dozens of compliments back about we really need this to get dredged. And I think you're seeing the support tonight. I think the majority of these people are going to tell you that they support dredging. So in wrapping up, I agree that there are many questions associated with the dredging that need to be answered. But it should be no surprise that a project this major with over 150 houses, there's going to be a lot of questions. These questions can only be addressed by open dialogue by all parties: Poquoson, York County, the Army Corps of Engineers, VMRC, and most importantly, the affected homeowners. You're going to get some of that tonight, I'm sure. That's why it's vitally important for the council to approve the signing letter to York County and proceed to the next phase so we can work through these issues. I've worked for the past 10 years on this dredging program. I've got a whole briefcase full of data I'm willing to share with anybody on the staff, either tonight or at some future date. Now, quickly to talk about some of the issues that came up in the working group meeting. York County is going to fund the engineering. That was what they brought to Mayor Hunt in 2015, because you only had one engineer at the time, and she wasn't capable to run all your other projects and this new dredging project. So we presented it as York County would fund it, York County would do the engineering, and she would just watch so she could get smart on the process and how to lay out for any future canals that needed to be dredged in the future. So that was a win-win for both sides. The other thing is about cost. We talked about $2 million. The cost is going to be split between York County and Poquoson, because we share the creeks. The only cost that won't be shared is if an individual homeowner wants his boat dock or his lift dredged. He'll contract with the contractor to do that portion. Another part was that somebody was worried about the piers. We're not going to dredge all the way out to the piers. There's a channel. It's either 24 feet wide or 30 feet wide. So it's well enough away from the piers. My piers on my boathouse go into the mud 25 feet. So taking 18 to 24 inches off the top is not going to affect the piers or the structural capability of the piers. Channel dredging is included in the cost estimates that York County did. It's been in that way since 2015. Environmental impacts, that's a good question that you brought up, because, and in your package you show the drainage ditches from the streets. A lot of developments now have retention ponds. Back when these neighborhoods were built, they didn't. They just let all the street water run into the creeks and hopefully flow to the ocean. The upper part of Lambs Creek where I'm at doesn't have a lot of tidal flow. So the silt comes in from the farmer field or from over on the Yorktown Road in Poquoson. Everything drains into Lambs Creek at my end and essentially sits there. And you can go to the revetments that are coming in from the street and just see mounds of silt that's built up. Even at high tide, you only have maybe 6 inches of clearance. In response to the surveys, 90% of the people that responded, and we have nearly 100 respondents, said they were in favor of dredging. Some of them marked maybe on funding, whether they would fund it or not, because we didn't know the cost. My goal was to tell these people, my goal was to only raise taxes $500 a year. And if you could do that, that's what we would shoot for, and we would spread the money out. I'm not going to tell Poquoson how they should fund it. York County is looking at low zero-cost bonds to fund it over a number of years. And that's something that would reduce the cost burden, the tax burden on the York County side. There was a question raised that, well, if we do one creek, then everybody's going to want it, their creek dredged. It's taken 47 years between dredges that were not even there, or 4 years away, even if we say yes. So that's going to be 50 years between dredges. York County has planned a second dredge in 12 years. Personally, I don't think we need to do a dredge in 12 years, and we certainly don't need to pay for it up front for something that may or may not happen 12 years down the road. But for Poquoson, was you have a lot of creeks out there, you don't have to do one right after another. You take the first one where your city engineers are going to look over York County's engineer's shoulder, learn how to do it, and then over the next how many years you can prioritize which creeks get dredged and space them out. And I don't see it's really going to be an impact to your capital improvements program and your fire and police resources. It should be a different pot of money. Yeah, somebody made a comment that city's not responsible. I think from an environmental standpoint, I think Poquoson and York County are responsible for keeping that water flow, which it does impact flooding. And I can't point to individual properties that do flood, but we heard at a meeting, I think in the last January city council meeting, a resident came in and claimed that their property and their neighbor's property flooded. And again, on the special tax district, I don't want to comment on how you're going to pay for it and how you're going to divide up the money. That's a local thing for Poquoson. And I thank you for listening to me, and I thank you for having this meeting, Mayor. And hopefully you're getting good feedback, and I would recommend wholeheartedly that we sign the letter, take it to the next step. As Janet said, there's no commitment at this point to continue with the project, but at least everybody can get smarter on it. We can get answers to a lot of these questions that I heard tonight. Thank you.
Robert Evans. Yes, sir.
First of all, I do want to thank y'all for having us. I'm in a little bit different position than most of these people. I live on the creek, 134 Fremore, and I probably have given a lot of people in this audience stuff raised at that pier, oysters and crabs. But I just got a few things I want to say. First of all, I've lived on Lambs Creek for 47 years. I've crabbed, I've oystered for 50 years. I was told by VIMS right off the top when they started this program to come over and they would teach me how to raise these oysters and I would have cleaner water in the creeks. So I did that. As you all know, dredging, the oysters are gone. They're dead. Right now I have 18,000 culture oysters. They were bought at $35 a thousand. I've got cages that cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,800 for the minute. It's a process, it's a quick process, but I'm probably the only one in here that lives off of the creek. Second thing is, the creek has lost at the point coming into the creek, the right and left-hand side, the Causey Point and the Riggins Point. Since I've been there, they've probably lost 150 yards. And that's going to continue. And if you dredge it, it's going to be right back, so you better have something right behind it. The fourth thing is, why should I have to pay more tax if I can go and come in my boat? I have never been where I haven't been able to go. I know that I was lucky. I was a Poquoson native, so I looked for deep water. Some of these people got big boats and 2 foot of water. The boats that are the the bigger boats up the creek. I've been living there, like I say, for 47 years. And the no wait sign was gonna be taken up. A lot of people will use it, but there's 4 or 5 that's gonna go wide open up there. And I've seen it over and over and over. So I don't know what to do about it. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed this. I hope y'all will do the right thing. If y'all decide to go with it, I'm for it. But right now, I wouldn't do it. So,
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. Sean Gorman? Sean?
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sean Gorman. I live at 312 Chicopee Orchard. The reason I came here tonight is I moved here about 2 years ago. I moved here in October of 2020. And in March of 2021, my son and I were out on my back dock, and I was helping him fill up a pail of water, and I fell in. I have never, well, there was one other time I've been scared in my life, and that's when I was a teenager doing really stupid things, and I'd like to think I've grown up since then, but I was scared because I immediately was submersed in muck up to here. It took my son to run and get his sister and both of them to fabricate a rope to navigate around the pilings, and to get me out, it took about an hour. I truly thought I was going to die, and the first thing I thought of is, I don't want my kids to see this. The second thing I thought of was, this is a public nuisance. Everywhere I've ever lived before, it was known you better dredge, not only for rainwater runoff, but for public safety. It's gonna happen sooner or later. The funds need to be allocated, whether it's because we're gonna dredge it, or there's gonna be a huge lawsuit. God forbid, if my children or someone else's children fall in there, they will likely die. It literally took me an hour, and if you think I'm lying, you can check with my neighbors who saw the whole thing go down, or you can come out to my house at any time, 312 Chinquapin, and you can jump in or even slowly get in. You will not get out on your own. It is a public nuisance. You guys have been on notice about this, and it's going to continue to be dangerous until something is done. I have heard some comments like, we don't own the water that flows in there. We don't own the basin. I think, yes, that is true, but Poquoson and York County have, for decades, thrown pure wastewater into that. Silt, farm waste, road waste. I've seen a tire float down that comes through. It's truly atrocious how it just runs off of both the streets in York County and Poquoson right into that waterway. And we've heard from others saying, well, we've heard there's been floodings. I can show you right now on my phone the last rain we had. I have metadata to show it exactly correlates to the last heavy rainfall we had. My yard was flooded up to 19.5 feet from my back window. It was up to my deck, and it was past that, and I measured it was 19.5 feet. I will show you these pictures. Every time there's heavy rains, it flows, that creek gets overflowed, and it comes into our yards. So it's really disheartening to hear saying, hey, we're gonna listen to everyone, we're gonna hear what you have to say, but I don't support this. And that, to me, really bothered me. That's why we're here. We're members of this community. We're here to tell you how this is impacting us. And I truly believe, one way or another, this is gonna take a lot of funds. Because if the roads were dangerous, you guys would anticipate lawsuits, right? We've all been using that creek, whether it's for recreation, to dump waste into it or not. We all have a hand in that. And if it's not fixed, someone will get injured, and it will be bad, and there will be lawsuits. It will be a liability. It is currently a liability. And not only that, but it's getting worse and worse. When it rains, every time, the floods come up higher and higher. And sooner or later, you're gonna have people realize, why am I paying more in taxes? Why am I paying more in flood insurance to move here? When really, at the end of the day, I'm at more of a risk of flooding and my children die. So I would just ask you guys just to kind of look in and see what really are the real risks, because I don't think those have really been discovered as much. So thank you for your opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Thank you. Mr. Causey, Ted, I saw you somewhere.
I'm Ted Causey. I've lived at 100 Darden Drive for 57 years, and I live on Lambs Creek. The district that you've determined to pay for the project, you say has about 106 or 9 homes. Are you going to require everybody on that whole list to pay, whether they have a boat or not, or whether they even want a deep channel or not? That's my question. Do they all have to pay that $950?
Mr. Causey, we're not going to do questions and answers.
Sir?
We're not going to do questions and answers. This is your turn to tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, well, I just wondered, because I think that all the people on the river don't have boats, and they're not all interested in dredging the channel. And I think that they should not be required to pay if they're not interested in having a boat and using it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Lisa Rodriguez. Good to see you, Lisa. I had a long conversation with you this
I
afternoon.
did, thank you so much.
Thank you for being
Thank you,
here.
City Council, and thank you for your thoughtfulness that has gone into this and the discussion during the work session. My husband and I moved here about 4 years ago, and until yesterday, I lived right on Lambs Creek. I knew nothing of this project. So my only request, thank you, Ms. Andrews, is to simply ask the citizens who are affected by this what they want with full disclosure of what the options are. I think there's confusion about what is and what may be, and a lot of discussion and disclosure about how we move forward, I think would be very beneficial. So thank you. And I support the letter, which I thought was very well written, and did not commit Poquoson too much of anything other than investigation. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Nora and Andy Rule, either one or both?
Sir, at this time, we don't have anything to add.
You sure? Okay. Libby Griebel, I saw Libby here somewhere. Libby?
I'm Libby Griebel. I live at 46 Shoreline Drive. As of this month, I've lived there for 69 years. So I have seen the water, as most of you have said, continue to diminish in water depth and continue to silt in. And I would just like to say that I would like to see the letter move forward, and let's investigate it. Let's see the outcomes of those investigations. There are environmental studies. There are all kinds of studies that will have to be performed. But I think that there is enough support here to at least let the letter go forward, and let's see what comes of that letter. There was a letter, I guess, that came in from York County. I've been all over the website today. I was unable to locate that, so I don't know what Chairman Noble had to say about that. So is it out on the web?
I am not aware of the letter from Chairman Noel or...
Well, the reason I asked that is because I personally did not know about this meeting, and shame on me because I didn't. But it says Mayor Hustle received an update, this was last meeting, from York County Administrator Neil Morgan in reference, I'm sorry, I said no, in reference to Lambs Creek dredging project. He will be sending out copies of the letter to the council. And I was looking for that letter because I thought that would be posted. Just out of curiosity, what that letter...
Just a minute, Libby. Is that letter online?
I believe the reference there is to the letter that is the subject of discussion this evening.
Well,
I
didn't read it that way, and I may be wrong.
I'm unaware of any letter we have received from Chairman Knoll on this subject.
And I misspoke when I said Chairman Knoll. It said, this was at the last meeting. Let's see. Mayor Hustle also stated the city workers did a great job on the corridor coming into the city. Mayor Hustle received an update from York County Administrator Neil Morgan in reference to the Lambs Creek dredging project. He will be sending out copies of the letter to council for review, this week for review. So I was looking for the letter, just to see what the letter had to say. Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know what...
Let me just get it clear for you, Libby. Is the letter that we wrote, the one that's matter of discussion tonight, is that on the website?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I believe that the reference, Ms. Gribble, is, I don't know how it's punctuated. We did receive a update and have a discussion with the county administrator and the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. Separate from that, I believe the mayor was speaking about this letter that was the subject of discussion this evening.
Not the letter that you were trying to move forward. This was something that came from York County. is the way I read this.
I understand
Did you
that.
not receive a letter from Neil Morgan in reference to this?
I have
property?
not. I have
You have
not.
not? Okay, all right, well, that answers that question. Secondly, I did want to just make some additional comments. I think that we that live on the water, have been on the water for many years, have paid our fair share of taxes living on the waterfront. And I think that as we move forward, and we find out what it's going to take if we decide to move forward with dredging, that not only are we expected to pay for it, but then after we pay for it and we get good water, then we're going to be taxed even higher. So I feel like that revenue that is coming in, that has come in from waterfront properties over the years, over the last 50 years, someone spoke, they have gone to the benefit of the community. I mean, they haven't just been held on Emmaus Road or off of those tributaries there. It's been distributed among the city, just like I don't have children in school. I did when I was in school, when I had children in school, you know, we paid the taxes, but I haven't had children in school for many, many years. But I understand as a community, that's part of being in a community, is to provide funds for a lot of activities that you may not participate in. So I would like for council to keep that in mind, that not only are there high taxes, I pay an exorbitant amount of taxes where I live, and I can only expect that they would increase if this dredging were to take place, which I am in favor of. I don't have a boat. I don't even have a pier. My pier went down in Isabel, has never been rebuilt because I'm not a water person. My father was a waterman, but I can remember when my dad was boating, and this has been many years ago, back in the early 2000s, he could pull his boat up to our pier. And he had, I think it was a 28 or 30 foot Chris Crab. And so during that time, it was a nice sized boat. And we could walk out of our house and get on that boat. That would never happen, never happen today. But secondly, I digress. I just would like for us to look into grants. I did just a little bit of research before I came in here tonight. There are a couple, and Mr. Hessel, Mayor Hessel, you may have some information on this or some knowledge of an act that was passed by the General Assembly, and it may not be applicable, I'm not sure, but it was an act amended to the Code of Virginia adding sections 62.1 through 62.3.4, and it was enacted to amend the Code of Virginia by adding these sections relating to the Virginia Waterway Maintenance Fund Grant Program. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, if that's even applicable here, but I do think that if we move forward, and I please encourage you to do that, let it play out, let's see what happens. And if there is grant money available, then maybe it is. And I also pulled up another article while I was doing this today. I had lots of time on my hands. There was a Eastern Shore project that's being done, and they have used this grant money to do 4 projects on the Eastern Shore. And if anybody wants to look at this, it's from the Eastern Shore Post that I thought was pretty interesting, and it said, Accomack and Northampton counties in July of 20 were awarded $426,500 from the Virginia Port Authority through the Virginia Water Maintenance Fund. So that is something that is in the code that I'm not a grant writer, and I don't know anyone that is, but I do think it's certainly an option that needs to be pursued. And I encourage the council to let this play out, and let's get the information, let's get informed on what this is all about and what our options may be at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim O'Connell? Mr. O'Connell?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the...
Absolutely.
I live at 402 Chinkopin Orchard, lived there a few months short of 30 years. When I got a sense of the working group's discussions and viewpoints tonight, and I'd just like to summarize what I kind of heard from the audience. There was this, well, we have 87 miles, much of it might get silted in, where we might set a precedent, so we're going to do nothing. Even though there's a lot of people that would like, some knowledge discovery, some investigation, maybe some leadership. We have billions of dollars in federal infrastructure funds. We have hundreds of millions of dollars in Virginia funds. If you team with York County, get some hard data, get some sense, and then maybe we'll be much more eligible to compete for those funds. But we're just going to do nothing, and eventually all the waterways are going to be silted in, and you're going to kick it down to future city councils to do something. Is that the responsible way to do? I think the responsible thing to do is to investigate, to gather data, to get a sense of the community, and then compete for grant money if tax money is not available or whatever. But to just do nothing because it's too hard, there could be issues, that to me doesn't seem like the responsible thing for a council to do. We should address problems before they become crises. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, sir. Kimberly Hansale, did I do that right?
Yeah, Hearthstone.
Kimberly?
Thank you. I just have a few talking points. So I am from Lambs Creek originally, born and raised there for 30 years. Now marina manager at White House Cove Marina. So from my experience over the last 6 months, I know that this won't be an isolated creek issue, but I do think that it, as Mr. O'Connell had said, it does behoove us to go ahead and develop these plans. I currently can't have transients, which brings in city tax dollars as well. They can only come into our port at high or medium high tide, based on the dredging. I know that's not specifically related to Lambs Creek, but I do know that it will be a continuing problem throughout. I know I'm not the only marina on Bennett's Creek either, but I do think that we should take this opportunity to develop a plan for the future, for Poquoson in general, for our whole community, because it will not just be Lambs Creek. Growing up, I remember with my brother, we were able to swim in the water, we were able to fish in the water. Now we can't even catch a flounder in our crab pot, if we can even catch a crab. Nor do we even enjoy swimming in the nasty water. I live 5 houses down from where that water comes from the public roads and dumps in. I've watched it over the last 30 years. We can only go out between 2-hour gap windows, come in between 2-hour gap windows. Most of the time we have to leave our boat out somewhere else. So I just do know that this will be a continuing issue for the city, not just now in Lambs Creek. I think that while we have the support from York County, it would behoove us to go ahead and explore those options, investigate, because this will be something that future councils will have to deal with for other creeks as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Colonel Lippincott.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, my name is Bob Lippincott. I live at 33 Carriage Hill Drive. And I was here 6 months ago, and I showed you some slides back then that Lambs Creek was nothing but a mud flat. At low tide and medium tide, high tide, you could get out plus or minus an hour. And that's going to be getting worse every day. I've lived on the creek for 42 years, and when I moved here, you could get in and out at any tide. It was great. That creek was dug in 1975. In my opinion, the city council back then made a huge mistake when he gave Jimmy Moore permission to dig that creek by not requiring a maintenance program. And that is to come back and dredge it in 5, 10, whatever number of years. It wasn't done. At the same time, they put in the outfall pipes, York County and Poquoson. Every time it rains, we get the street dirt, rocks, debris flushing into the creek. And that's not just the people that live on the creek. That's the entire neighborhoods that drain into that stormwater system. So that is shared by more than just us. Now, Poquoson is known as a water town, a recreational town on the water, and we support our watermen and crabs and oysters and that sort of thing. We're known for that. That's going to go away when these creeks all fill in. And it's going to happen because we're doing nothing about it. Now, York County has been trying for 15 years to come up with a plan to do this. Poquoson has done absolutely nothing. I want to change that. I want you city council members to think about that and be positive about this dredging. Now, the big issue, of course, is money. How do you pay for it? We haven't investigated that yet. Some people talk about grants, others talk about the infrastructure funds, of which there's at least $2 billion, I called Warner's office, available for water projects. So we have to look at that. And they're not going to listen to me. They're going to listen to a city representative or your county representative, ask for that money. If we have to write a grant, fine. If we have to hire a grant writer who's a professional, fine. We'll get this done, and it will not incur a tax on people that live on the creek. Hopefully we can avoid that. Anyhow, I heard some reservations about why we shouldn't be doing this, too many from the city council. One is, not everybody on the creek is in favor of the dredging. Well, that's true. Not everybody in the creek's a Republican. That's true. I wish it were. But you're never going to get 100% of anything. You can't please all the people all the time. So if we can get 80% participation in a positive vein for this dredging project, we've done well. Your county apparently thinks the same thing. Dredging will compromise boat lift poles. Not true. My poles are down 10 or 15 feet. Digging down 2 feet won't affect the poles at all, and they're not going to dredge out along the poles. They're going to dredge the middle of the creek. So that's a specious argument. City council should not get involved. I've heard that. Well, what's the city council for if not to represent the people in their district and the important projects that they feel should be put forward? If we dredge one creek, we have to dredge them all. Not true. We've been working on this for 15 years on Lambs Creek. We have York County ready to participate and pay for half of it. So we're unique in that. And I think the dredging of Lambs Creek should be a prototype for the other creeks that will eventually have to be dredged. And not all of them in Poquoson, but the ones that are going to be important to people that live on them. And if we can get a method to do that, using grant money or whatever money, and we know how to do it, then that'll flow in the future. But Lambs Creek, it's like the squeaky wheel. We've been working on this for many years, trying to get support. Now, and I won't go over much about how we're going to pay for it again, but again, my first choice would be grant money. Get a grant writer, have him write the money. If we write the grant. If we don't know of any in this town, we'll go out and get one. A lot of other towns, Hampton, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and so forth, have done this. So there are writers out there that know how to make this happen. So we just need to contact them, find out that guy's name, and we have to pay him $1,000, fine, I'll pay him. So, I hope the goal of this meeting is to authorize the mayor to send that letter to York County, which simply mentions joint venture and tells York County that we're with them in this project. Secondly, I hope we can produce a letter that goes out to everybody that lives on the creek and gets a yes or no that they're in favor of it. There's going to be some no's, but there's going to be a lot more yeses. And I think we should track this on an agenda item on the city council so we don't forget about it, as we have for the last 42 years. So anyhow, that's what I feel about it, and I hope we can get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Jenny Dale, or Dial?
Dale.
Dale, thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Jenny Dale, and I grew up on 33 Carriage Hill Drive. Bob Lippincott is my father. And I just came here tonight to sort of give you guys a different perspective, another way to look at this project. I had a slideshow, but I didn't meet the deadline, so bear with me. One was being passed around, so if you guys might have it on you. Okay.
You do.
So obviously the problem, we all know what the problem is. When we were talking earlier about the storm drain system, Poquoson is a MS4. It's a phase 2. We are permitted to discharge. That is what the DEQ gives us to, authority to do. So we can drain our streets and our channels and our ditches. The permit actually is comprised of ditches, waterways, anything that conveys stormwater. So that's your MS4, that's what that means, municipal separate storm sewer system. In Poquoson's TMDL action plan, that is a component of the permit. It is required to be met in 2023, 40% load reduction of phosphorus and other pollutant loads for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. As you mentioned earlier, you guys have already met that goal. So for that permit cycle, 2023, you guys are good. However, the last additional remaining that was required to be removed, and this is all found on your website, was an additional for suspended solids and nitrogen and phosphorus. You guys opted into HRSD credit banking. Well, that's not doing anything to the environment. It's buying some credits. So in actuality, we're not helping the environment. We're not doing anything. We have purchased credits. The permit plan also allows for the city to make additional pollutant removal projects. You will have another permit cycle in 23 that will go to 28. They're 5 years long. So that next permit cycle you can start thinking about. You've already met your 23, so the next permit cycle, this one project could, do a lot of bang for your buck. The 3 grants that the DEQ offers, the SLAF would be the one that's applicable. Like you said, you've already obtained funds for that. But just to let you know that particular program is a grant. It does match, and there is the PDC that is local that will help you obtain these projects and monies and funds, and we'll give you that guidance. The SLAF grants, there's many different criteria that have to be met in order to get that money, but some of the examples would be wetland restoration, buffer restoration, which would be very applicable here, and even living shorelines, which somebody mentioned earlier about oysters. Well, living shorelines, they create habitat, and you can do breakwaters and different oyster reefs and castles that also help with erosion issues. However, the erosion is not necessarily coming from people's property, it's coming from the stormwater drains. It's been silted in, it is pollutants that can be removed that have all come off of the storm drain system. There's also loans. If the city does not want to pay for it all up front, you can get a loan program, and I've already spoken with the Virginia Resources Authority. They actually have a program now that got passed by Biden to do dredging, specifically dredging. So there is a loan program with low interest out there that you guys could possibly look at getting. Some of the pros just for this one project would be the removal of that accumulated sediment. I'll say spoils. That is a requirement in MS4 for treating and removing pollutants of concern, and that would be giving the creek more quantity requirements and as well as quality, because you're removing the pollutants. So that creek will have more storage for storms, flooding events, resiliency. That's on everybody's plate now. That is a big thing. So we can get ahead of the game and focus on those resiliency efforts and just a lot of different things that we can apply to this one project. We also property owners will have access to the resource. Their property values will be restored. And we're going to restore wildlife and habitat by removing that sludge. BMP's best management practices, stormwater ponds, they have to be dredged every 30 years. This creek has sort of functioned as that. There's no vegetation on the bottom of that creek. The plants can't grow. That means there's no crabs, there's no fish that come up that creek because it's all polluted, loaded. He was saying the oysters didn't really live or survive. Well, that's because the bottom is full of contaminants and the oysters would never survive in that kind of environment. So we get all that muck out, restore it to be a viable system with normal organics and normal bottom composition, you'll have a much livelier and healthier ecosystem. It also gets, the city will also get a return. People will invest with boats and watercrafts, and, you know, people will be going up to 7-Eleven getting their beer and food and ice. So, you know, the city will get a return on the investment. And there's also potential for the city, you know, we will be issuing permits to the people with watercrafts. It will bring in that income. A lot of people on the creek right now don't have boats. There's a lot of boat lifts on that creek, but no boats. So, you know, it's just something to continue. Considering one project, you could get all the benefits. You can meet both you could meet 2 or 3 requirements of your MS4 permit for the next permit cycle. And that would be your education and public outreach. You can bring it to the schools. You can have kids go out there and do like little field and day trips. You can do storm drain stenciling. It's all about the education and outreach. That can be done with that project. Meeting your TMDL goals for the next permit cycle. Coordinating with adjacent MS4s, that's a requirement for the permit, so you're meeting that box. I have spoken with Sean Crawford today, your city engineer, and I know he's new to the city, but that's something that I'm sure he could help you guys out with, and he is there for you as a resource. And this would also mean that we would go in there and do all these things at one time with one permit. Don't go in there multiple different times. And then the last thing I would have to say is the outfalls in the creek itself that the city is responsible for maintaining they're either undersized or they're broken. And they've caused the erosion themselves along that area where the outfall normally lands. So if you go to the outfalls further up the creek, you can clearly see that the structures have been completely fallen off, broken off. So it is the city's responsibility to do maintenance on that. So here's another opportunity to do the maintenance at the same time of dredging the creek. And there's also one more thing just to throw out there. If you wanted to do more water quality, the city only owns, I think, 3 BMPs. You could add things to the storm drain structures and you could get credit that way too. Put a tree in it, filters, there's manufactured treatment devices. There's a lot of opportunity for this town to take to get credit for your MS4, and it's not just about the dredging. So it's about helping the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Jimmy Jones? Jimmy Jones? Oregon Thrill Kill?
Second.
What was the first name, sir? I'm sorry.
Corbett.
Okay, thank you.
You got it right. I have a few pictures if you'll indulge me. You guys might remember I was here 6 months ago as well. Just one set there. Here's another set. Just pass those down. Yeah, thank you. I live on 6 Northwest River Drive. Thanks again, first off, for having me and for having everyone here tonight. I want to first just say that I'm very much in favor of the letter to York County. I think it's the right thing for us to do. It's a responsible thing in Poquoson to explore this project. But I also am in favor of dredging, so I'll get my agenda out there right away. I think it's in my own personal interest, but I think it's also in the interest of Poquoson as well. I've lived in Poquoson most of my life, exception of going to Old Dominion University and living for a short time in Newport News when I met my future wife. But I immediately brought her, she was a Newport News native, back to Poquoson. And I said, you know, Poquoson is a great place to live. I was raised there. My dad was the doctor here in town. Many of you probably know. I went through Poquoson school systems. I know a lot of people out here. It's a great community, right? And it's a great place for me to raise my family. I brought my wife out here. We have a family now. I have a almost 6-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter enrolled in Poquoson schools. And even before I had those kids in Poquoson schools, I was paying Poquoson taxes, which I was fully on board with because I love this community and I think it's a great community. And again, the reason I convinced my wife to move from Newport News to Poquoson, we moved in 2005, and we lived on another waterfront property off of East Sandy Point, down Browns Neck Road. Lived there for quite a while. The flooding got to us. It's much lower property than where we are now, and we decided that it would be in our best interest to move. And we were lucky to find a home on Northwest Overdrive and put an offer in, and we're lucky enough to be accepted, and we love where we live. We love Northwest Overdrive. The one thing that we don't love about it is the creek. When we moved in 2017, the creek was deeper than it is even today. It's only been 5 years, and I have noticed, and I've sharing some pictures here, I've noticed that the creek has filled in. And when I was here about 6 months ago, I told you guys about one of the things that I witnessed and took pictures and shared it with you then. When we did the repaving of the whole Westover Shores subdivision, there was a lot of milling that went on. And I watched the contractors shove that right into our outflows. And I showed you the pictures. They were supposed to have mitigation put up. They were supposed to have sandbags. Those sandbags failed. Some of them they never even put up. And I watched that just go right in. I spoke to them. I called the city. I never got a return phone call. I'm not mad about that. I know this is a busy bureaucracy we've got here. But at the same time, I want to make the point that it's on us, right? We're citizens of this town. We contracted with that company, I think it was Basic, to come out and to do all that work. They did the work, but they didn't do it the way that they should have. They impacted the environment. They impacted our creek. They definitely caused additional silt to go into our creek. At that time, it was on schedule to do Emmaus Road and that neighborhood as well. And there were a few folks that were here at that meeting that also expressed their concerns and said, hey, City Council, I think they spoke after me, can we make sure that doesn't happen when we have our section of the road paved? Yeah, you got it, yeah. He said, thank you. Mr. Fay, thank you for having, he's still got the pictures. And I did not do my due diligence to go inspect it. I didn't inspect the other neighborhoods, but I hope that the same thing did not happen in their neighborhoods as well, but I fear it probably did, because I don't think those mitigation techniques were put in place, right, to make sure that all that silt and asphalt did not fall into the creek through the outflows. So just again, to make sure that we own the responsibility. It is our creek, right? We share it with York County, but it is our creek, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we're not impacting the environment and that we leave it in a navigable, usable way, especially when we've got so many folks that are on that creek that are taxpayers and that have an expectation of being able to use that creek. I'm sure many of you remember this. In 2012, Poquoson came out with the motto, Poquoson is the place, right? I've watched the video. I was very proud in 2012 as a Poquoson native and a Poquoson resident to see that we were outreaching to folks. I think we were also, right around that time, named one of the best places to live, right? It was an amazing time for Poquoson. We had this fantastic video that was on YouTube and Vimeo, and it was touting all the benefits of water life, Chesapeake Bay life in Poquoson. There were scenes in those videos of people being on the water, boating. There were scenes of Browns Neck and all the wonderful marinas that we have, and our fishermen, right? It really, really brought to life what we have here that is special in Poquoson. I thought it was a great campaign. And I'm sure that it brought additional revenue into the city, and it probably brought additional developments, right? We've got a development that's going on right next door to us here, and I'm sure that was an impetus, right, in 2012 to bring in that extra revenue. My point in saying all that is that we have a duty. If we're going to advertise that Poquoson is the place, we better make sure it's the place, right? We better make sure that we're living up to those awesome videos that we've got out there, touting our waterfront, touting our recreation, touting all the things you can do if you become a resident of Poquoson. I know everyone's talked about, hey, there's tons of tributaries, tons of creeks in Poquoson, and yes, that's true. I've lived on several of them. I grew up on Windy Point. You want to talk about a dredging project that needs to be done, talk about Windy Point. It's a tough one, right? My mom still lives there. I'm not advocating that we do every single creek in Poquoson. I obviously lived on East Sandy Point. That's another one that probably needs to be dredged as well, but this is an opportunity for us. We have a willing partner in York County. You've heard from the York County folks here tonight. Why don't we use their expertise? And at least, if we don't want to call it expertise, their experience so far in talking with the relevant agencies and use what they've got in place. I heard tonight from Jim that they've got an engineer on staff that's willing to help us. This would be a great way for us to model for other creeks in Poquoson. We can set up a model for the rest of Poquoson based on what we do here on Lambs Creek and in the subdivisions that are impacted by Lambs Creek. One other thing I just want to mention, and I know I talked about this when I was here last time, and it's similar to some other stories that you've heard. I unfortunately did, and I'll just remind you guys, have to go into the creek. I didn't want to. You know, I've lived on creeks in Poquoson, and I know what the silt can do, but my dog, who ended up passing away about a month later, had fallen into the creek. She was half blind and deaf, and had gotten off of her leash, unfortunately, and I went into the creek in December of 2020, and I could not get out of the creek. And my wife also had to get a rope to help me get out of the creek. It was scary. I swam out into the middle of Lambs Creek where I am. It's pretty broad. Swam out in the middle of the creek to get our dog, who was nearly drowning, and brought her back to the shoreline. And you would think I would just be able to climb up on the rocks and get out. I couldn't. I was stuck in that muck, and I had to get my wife to bring a rope down to help me get out. And I'm a pretty athletic guy, right? I should be able to do this. I'm scared. We had some friends over, family and friends over for St. Patrick's Day. We were having a great time in the backyard, and a couple of the kids went down onto our dock, and it scared the ever-living you-know-what out of me, because I was afraid one of those kids might fall into the creek, and what in the world would happen if they did. So I said, all the kids got to come back up to the house. We can't have this happen, right? I'm not saying that dredging would fix that, right? They could still drown, but I'm telling you from my experience, that creek is a danger, and I think we have a responsibility to do something about it, in addition to the financial impacts that it could positively have on the city and all the people that are sitting here tonight. With that, I'll give up my time. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, sir. Steve Pappas. Mr. Pappas.
Good evening.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, sir. Thank you for listening to us, Mayor Hustle, City Council. It's been a long conversation, obviously. In 1994, I moved here, not here, I actually moved to York County, and I lived at the end of Lambs Creek because I wanted to live on the water, just like I did when I grew up. There was about this much water there. And I realized that that wasn't sufficient. So I moved here to Poquoson, where I still currently have 4 feet of water at low tide. And I paid dearly for that. Could have bought a property for a lot less in a different county. But I raised my children here. I'm very glad my grandchildren are here as well. So that was in 1994, 28 years ago. I have some issues that I'd like to share. Some of them might be repetitive, but I'll make it quick. Words matter. This is the 21st century. Obviously, lots of things matter. Words matter. I have a concern about the draft letter as it's written. And I think Mr. W., who did a great job of putting out emails, sorry to use your name, but you've done a lot of work. But it's important that words matter. And today, I heard, and I'm here to correct, that based on the draft letter, it states that for purposes of moving forward, the original scope of Mrs. Drake's January 26, 2015 letter will be used. You would agree. In that letter, under the cost approximation section, it states 3 York County channels and 4 Poquoson channels.
Steve, we need you talking to the microphone.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But I hope you can hear me. So it said 4 Poquoson channels. The 5th channel is the channel that was originally identified to include the houses facing North Fremore Drive, which had, pick a number, 25 homes. And back in 2015, since I lived here all that time, I knew my neighbors, I knew my neighborhood. There were a lot of retirees, a lot of people without boats, a lot of people who were widows or widowers. And possibly back then that would have been a problem for the 80%. Today, A lot of those properties have turned over, and there are people now who just put up recently north-facing Fremore Drive boathouses or boat lifts. And, you know, today, more people on that north-facing Fremore Drive may well be interested. So I think that given that words matter, we should think about, if we send this draft, modifying it to include all 5 Poquoson ancillary creeks, not just 4. So I'm not opposed to the dredging per se. I'm for revising the draft. I'm for including the 25 or so houses on north-facing Fremore. And I am for excluding those of us who have sufficient depth. Because if we were talking cows and everybody wanted a cow, I already have one. I don't need a second one, and I don't want to pay for a second cow. This project, there was something else that was said tonight, words matter. You know, police, fire, schools, those are for the public good. And I pay taxes like everybody else, whether you're from York County or you're from Poquoson, we do that for the public good. This is for private good. Sure, there'll be residual benefits, whether it's the chemicals in the water potentially, unless we kill all the sea life by dredging, because I have a biologist friend who says this is going to be horrendous, so you get both sides of that. So I'm for revising the draft, include the 25 houses north-facing Fremore, not being forced to pay if you have sufficient depth. This basically just means move it closer to Mr. Moore's property to start. And then to include language in what you might then send that states that we have to safeguard the creek from further accretion, which is layer upon layer upon layer of silt coming in, by restoring the 2 groins or jetties coming from the Riggin side at York County and from the Causey side. And only in those ways do I think that Lambs Creek benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Got the Lawrence part. Not sure I can do the Triggs.
Yep. Good evening, and Lawrence Triggs, 41 Carriage Hill Drive. Appreciate the time. I'm not going to be long. I echo all the positive flow for this dredging project. Moved here in 2010. At the time, I bought a boat, had about 7 or 8 hours. I knew I was playing tides. 7 or 8 hours of boat time, either side of high tide. Today, I've got maybe 3. To the gentleman who said we have big boats, I've got a boat that drafts at 14 inches, and I can't take it out. So it sits in my backyard on a trailer, and I've towed it all last year. Didn't even use my lift. Again, I'm not gonna go into that too much. I do have, and I know you're not answering questions, and I respect that. But to be transparent, and maybe in future letter or something that you could put out, I don't understand what the 80% means and what the identified property owners are or who they are. So if that could be explained at some point in time, I think everyone would appreciate it. Not sure if that's 80% was an arbitrary number or it's written somewhere that the council goes with this 80% rule. I don't know. But I close it by saying, what if you lived on Lambs Creek? What if you were sitting out here? Oh, even there. You know, what is your legacy when you walk out? Are you going to be leaving where people say he didn't invest or she didn't invest in the future of Poquoson? Or are you going to walk out where people say that person took the time, supported the community, invested in Poquoson, and made it a better place. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All righty. Kathy McLean? McLean? Is that all right?
Yeah, Macklin.
Macklin, okay.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight. I didn't come here tonight to speak. This is my first time participating in one of these council meetings. But I came to gain knowledge and awareness of the situation. And I agree, and I want to comment to Ms. Andrews there. When I was listening to you speak, I was on that recreational side. I was being selfish about, I just bought this waterfront property, and I bought a boat, and I'm excited to be on the water. But as the night grows on, I'm thinking of the environmental issues too. I too live on the York County side of Lambs Creek. I'm a new resident. I've only been on, we moved in December of 2020. So we've only been there 15 months. And I too have that mud, which I really think it's like quicksand more than mud. I mean, I've tried to clean because I'm new and I'm excited to get my waterfront looking nice. I tried to clean all of the debris and the trash all around my shoreline, 300 feet of it. And you can't, you sink in it. There's no way you could clean that up the way that it is. So what I'm saying is don't sweep this under the carpet for another 15 years. If there's something we could do as residents, a subcommittee of some sort, to try to help you gain the knowledge. I know you guys are all busy, but this is really important. And when I sat back there tonight, I heard how passionate the people were to get this resolved, or at least get it moving in the right direction. I've been in York County for over 40 years. I love York County, and it was my dream to live on the water. And I worked real hard to be able to get the home that I've dreamt of, and I hate to see it turning into a nightmare. So I just want to say I'll do whatever I can personally, maybe a subcommittee to be formed, a task force to be formed, but somebody to get to the bottom of this, because we got to be more proactive in the situation on Lambs Creek. And I got to tell you too that I am a real estate agent, and I've been in real estate for over 16 years. And I can't even begin to tell you the desire for people to live on the water in Poquoson and York County. Unbelievable. People want to be here on the water. Let's give them a beautiful backdrop that they want and they're paying for. And lastly, I want to say that I got a postcard here at the beginning of the year that my taxes, or my assessment, was going up. And it was going up by over $300,000 on my property. So now I'm going to be paying over $1,000 a month taxes on that beautiful waterfront property, right? So I would like to be able to say I'm getting my money's worth. That's all I got to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone that we missed, or anyone that wants to speak? Okay, council, let's take 10 minutes, please, and then we'll reconvene, okay?
Just about the letter from Sheila that's really meant to, the way back October letter from.
If this is what the council wants to do, I suppose,
No, I don't know what. Although I did recognize that that's.
Oh, we're in the public, so they can come over and listen to us if they want. I've always wanted to sit there. I've always wanted to sit there. made a letter. Why are you apologizing? It's just so everybody at home can hear. No, we can hear you, but the people at home can't hear. Or Bud listening, right?
Can you possibly just there's some concern there that we're on table this issue?
I think my feeling is Keith's feeling too.
If there's a change, we want to table this.
And we need, I think Keith actually has some changes, which I was hoping he would bring up when we actually do the vote. He had several changes where he said, I think before we send a letter, I would like to see these changes.
I'm just, I can do any more investigation if you want to hear it.
I mean, I think at this point, there's just so much information gathering that has to be done. And re-looking at these people have deep water. They don't need it, so we need to redraw and re-look at what district it would be. And my feeling is about,
saying, if you
Everybody
hear me
get
on
it.
this phone,
Everybody will get it. I'm sorry, Bud, did you have something to say?
I just want to make sure you can hear me on this phone. The battery of my other phone died, and I had to trade phones.
He had to get on his other phone.
Okay. Okay, you good now, Bud, or not?
Yeah, can you hear me good?
Yeah, here you good. Did you want to make any comments before we reconvene?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir.
Relative to the Lambs Creek project?
Yes.
For the purpose of moving forward in the consideration of the potential joint project to be paid for through grants, state or federal funds, then my thoughts on the project would be totally different. But Mr. Pappas' comments were right. Words matter. And tonight, when this comes up, what we'll be voting for is the letter, and the next to the last paragraph of the letter says, for those who may or may not have read it, for the purpose of moving forward with the consideration of this potential joint project, the City Council at its March 28, 2022 meeting, that date will have to change, expressed its preliminary support for the original project scope as presented in Mrs. Drake's memorandum of January 26, 2015, to be funded through a special service tax overlay district. Council concurs with the special tax participation threshold of at least 80% of the identified special district property owners expressing support for the inclusion of their property in the special tax district as a condition for this project moving forward. That means, without knowing what the cost is, we're agreeing to move the project forward and potentially require 20% of the people in that district, whether they want it or not, to pay special taxes. When it comes time to vote, I cannot agree with that part of this letter. Thank you.
Okay, Bud, are you hearing us well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, buddy, I'm sorry, you had a motion, we adopted this, was there a second?
Second.
Is that a dog? What is that?
No, that's probably feedback, because as you know, there's about a 20-second delay.
Okay.
So if Councilman Southall has a television on, you're probably hearing
Okay.
that feedback.
Okay, well, he's watching a dog show.
Probably watching this.
Okay, we have a motion, and the motion's been second. Ms. Kim, please.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Bud?
Remember, he's got a delay.
Is this for the Lambs Creek project letter?
This is the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, yes. Yes.
Councilman Fye.
Yes.
Councilman Hux.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Mayor Hessel.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
Thanks, Kim. We have a public hearing on our agenda. It has to do with receipt of bids for the sale of publicly owned property located on Poquoson Avenue. Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of Council, you'll recall from your last meeting, you authorized us beginning this process. The piece of property in question, if you are going towards and past the middle school, it is a couple of properties past the second middle school entrance. It is a vacant piece of property owned by the city. Council authorized us to move forward to advertise for public hearing and advertise to receive sealed bids for this property. At this time, well, at the conclusion of this, if you would open the public hearing, then the city clerk will open and read aloud any sealed bids that we have received. Following that, any person in the audience, including but not limited to those persons putting forward a bid, have an opportunity to speak. Based on past practice, and I think good practice, at the conclusion of the public hearing, it has been this council's tradition to wait a minimum of 2 weeks before formally considering an offer. If that explanation is sufficient, I would respectfully ask that you open the public hearing.
I think that is more than sufficient, Mr. Wheeler. We will open the public hearing. If there's anyone in our audience that would like to address this issue, we'd be delighted to hear from you at this time.
We should start with the clerk.
With the clerk.
We received one sealed bid, is that correct, Ken?
Correct.
All right.
We at Extreme Builders would like to submit an offer to purchase a city-owned property. The parcel that we are interested in purchasing is located at 1013 Poquoson Avenue, parcel 20-1-36. Our offer to the city of Poquoson is an as-is, where-is cash offer of $75,000. If there are any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to call.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And the public hearing is open, so if we have anyone in our audience who would like to address that issue, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Respectfully suggest that you table this matter for 2 weeks, sir.
All right, looking for a motion.
Move we table this matter for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion made and second that we table the issue. Any concerns or comments? Any questions? If not, Ms. Kim?
Oh, I'd like to
I'm
make a
sorry.
correction
Yeah,
if I
bud.
could, Mr.
Sorry.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
If you table it, it takes a motion to bring it back, so you postpone it for 2 weeks.
If you want to change to postpone,
Yes.
okay, and Keith?
Agree.
Okay, all right. Okay, Ms. Kim?
Councilman Fye?
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman?
Aye.
Councilman Southall?
Aye.
Councilman Hux?
Aye.
Mayor Hessel?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
All right, thank you, Kim.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
If you table a motion to a specific date, does that require a motion to bring it back?
I think that you always have a motion to bring it back when you table it. I believe the better course of action is. to
Even
postpone.
if you table it for a specific time
I
frame?
think the better thing to do is
Okay,
postpone.
thank you.
Okay, let's move on to old business, consideration of a draft letter to York County pertaining to the proposed Lambs Creek dredging project. Bud, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We had about a 10-minute recess, and we did have some discussions amongst council. So since you weren't here and were not part of it, please pay close attention to the motion.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
As I sit here trying to digest everything that we have shared tonight, with all due respect and consideration to everything that was said and everybody that was here tonight, I'm grateful that we live in a country to where we can engage in such civil discourse. That being said, a couple comments I heard tonight, I feel like I cannot let sit because of my care, concern, and respect for city staff. I heard a previous city engineer being described as incapable, and I feel like I need to comment directly on that. I never cease to be impressed with the city staff. They're highly professional. I think they do a wonderful job for us. So as an elected official, I felt compelled to clarify that. I also heard city administration described as a bureaucracy. I could not disagree more. I never underestimate the capabilities of these fine folks. There's no way we can show enough gratitude and appreciation for what they do. have a very lean, efficient, and highly professional staff, and they are by no means a bureaucracy. So, thank you. With regard to the motion on sending the letter, out of respect, as I said, in consideration for everything that was said tonight, my motion will be in support of my position all along. But as I expressed earlier, and I'll stand by my words from earlier, but I am absolutely not so arrogant to believe that I know it all, not even close. There are those here tonight far more knowledgeable than I am on the subject of dredging. So that being said, I move to not send the letter to York County, but commit the city to further researching the ideas that were presented tonight.
All right, thank you, David.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. Are there any comments, any questions? Bud, did you hear it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, any other comments?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Is York County expecting a response to us? Is that why we were sending the letter? They were expecting a response from us?
We had talked early on about 3 different steps. When we talked about the 3 steps, which the 3rd step would have directed a letter when we got there to the folks that live on Lambs Creek, these people and others. That was in step 3. Originally, we had 3 steps that we wanted to do. Council wasn't real happy with the 3 steps. So we just kind of said, well, okay, what do we want to do? Do we want to send this letter or do we not want to send this letter? And as far as I'm concerned, I think as close as I can remember anyway, that most of this council was not in favor of sending the letter. However, I think what David has done has answered the question of the folks that are here tonight, number one. And I don't know that we need to move any further away from that. So what will happen is we will, if it passes this council, this motion, we will absolutely get involved in some of these areas that have been mentioned to us tonight and see where it takes us. And I think that answers everybody's question here tonight.
I guess my question is, this letter is to Sheila Knoll, who is the York County Board of Supervisors.
That's right.
Was this letter because she requested a response from us?
Yes, she wanted a response from us, and then York County would have their own work session with no given time, and then respond back to us. Hopefully, when they respond back to us, that we can move on to step number 2. And at the end of the day, we'd finally reach step number 3, which would be sending our folks a letter, doing our own survey. The last survey that I'm aware of was 2015. There were no's, there were maybes, there were yeses, and there were a bunch of non-applicable. I don't even know what that means. And I did talk to the gentleman, I don't know if he's here tonight or not, from York County. Lives on the other side of the creek. Was it you, sir? That actually did the survey. Yes. And you and I had a conversation just the other day. Yeah, Friday. So what I think David's doing with this motion is saying, okay, we're not going to send the letter, but we are going to. It doesn't mean in the future we don't send the letter. Maybe we will. I think what we're going to need to do tonight is I've learned some things. I'm sure all of us have that I wasn't aware of, and I think we need to take them in consideration. And I think David's motion does that.
I agree with that, but then here's my concern. My concern is, yes, I think we need to investigate. I think there was a lot of information presented tonight that was really good, but we owe a response to York County. So is there a plan as part of this research or task force or whatever it is we're going to do? Because it seems very vague what we're committing to do. I'm not clear on what we're committing to do, other than
I don't
we're
think,
going to investigate this. Will there be a response to York County at some point?
I would say at some point, yes.
Okay. That's just what,
Yeah, I would say.
I feel like if we clearly owe them a response, then at some point, maybe after we gather all this information,
We,
we
York County,
wouldn't
York
need to
County,
respond to
York
them.
County will be notified, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got one thing. I agree with David's motion. I don't think it should be sent, especially as it's written. I do have a few little changes that I wanted to see in it, but if we're going to talk about it more, which we are, I'll let that go. There were two things that came up tonight that are I don't want to say it concerned me, but something that I hadn't reckoned with was talking about falling in the mud, not being able to get out. And the question that I asked myself was, will the dredging rid the creek of the silt, sediment, and mud? And will the dredging fix the hazard of falling in that mud? I don't know if that will, but it's something I'm going to look into.
Okay. All right, any other questions, any other comments? Let me just make one more comment. Davis, your comments were greatly appreciated, and I think staff knows exactly how all of us feel regarding what they do for us every day and do for this community. There was one comment, they talked about us leaving a legacy, and I think it was directed to each and every one of us. I would just like to say, I'm not concerned about the legacy that I leave here when I'm gone. If I haven't done it over the last 45 years or however long I've been doing this, then there won't be a legacy of Gordon Helsel. But I am quite satisfied with my performance on the city council and any other organization I've been involved in as long as I've lived here. So just want to make that comment. Okay.
Can I make one more comment? I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Carrie told me last meeting I'm allowed to talk, so I'm
You
taking
are,
him up on
please.
that. I just want to thank everybody here that came out today. I think it's amazing when people really care about an issue. I've been on your side on a different issue before. I think when a group of people really care about something, that they can make change. I believe that. I've seen it here with several issues. I hope as a council that our action tonight that this issue will not die, because I think you have clearly said that it's important. I think it's important for us as a council to do our own survey and find out how many of our citizens this is important to. I think you guys were all very respectful when you spoke to us, and I heard every word that you said, and I appreciate all of it. And I hope that this council will do what we're saying we're going to do tonight, which is investigate this issue and poll our citizens and find out how our citizens feel about this, and maybe get some of you guys who are smarter, who would be willing to set up a task force and look into grant money and figure out if our citizens are interested in a tax district. Because I do think that this project could be a model for the same problem that will come up in other creeks. And it doesn't obligate us to do that, but if we figure it out here, like somebody who was very smart said, Hampton has figured out this problem. They've had these problems, they've figured it out. I think if this is a model and we can somehow get it to work without it being a financial burden on the city or the taxpayers, we can use that for models for other people who say, I want my creek dredged, and we can say, well, these citizens were willing to pay for it, and this is how we made it happen, because I do think it's going to be an issue that Poquoson is going to have to deal with, not with just Lambs Creek, but in the future. So you guys need to hold us to task, and if it's something you care about and it doesn't move forward and you don't see action happening, you can email Kim to email us and follow up on it. And I would encourage you, if this is important to you, that you do that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I was going to say this to council directives, but since we got the audience now, I'll go ahead and say it. We have one tax rate in Poquoson that applies to all the property in Poquoson. We don't have a special tax for waterfront or non-waterfront or wetlands or farmland. We just have one tax rate, and I wanted to make that clear.
Okay.
We do.
All right. Thank you, Kerry. Any other questions, any other comments, Bud?
Yeah, Gordon. First, I'd like to second Janet's comments. I'd like to thank everyone who attended the meeting tonight and those at home for paying attention to their government, okay? The views expressed, pro and cons, okay, are important to all of us to make a decision. I'd also like to second David Huxley's comments about the city staff. The city staff of Poquoson is second to none. They are first-class people. They work very hard, okay? The entire city staff, including Randy sitting right there, okay, and everybody else, okay? This is a hard-working city, and the city does the best it could, it can, and it's better than any city that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you, Bud. Okay.
Call the question.
We're ready. Ms. Kim?
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Councilman Hux?
Aye.
Councilman Fogg?
Aye.
Councilman Southall?
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman?
Aye.
Mayor Hessel?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Let's move on to new business. First item, by the way, if you want to stay, you're welcome, but if you'd like to leave now, and somehow I think you're probably ready to go.
Well, sure. So they pay more for being on the water.
Well, no, they pay more because they're property.
Well, but their point is,
Hey.
it's more valuable because it's on the water, but there's no water. You're welcome.
Sir? Oh.
Well, I do think the letter needs to be, I do think the letter needs to be revised. I do think the letter needs to be revised. I followed you
You guys do a meeting first and not wait on them. And the 2015 data, these can be updated.
Sure.
Because they're way over. And if you put a
You're gonna pass out for some.
how much is it gonna cost?
People never know when it's written. They get their point.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir. Okay, I'm sure. Yes, sir. Okay. Just a second till they do their conversation. Okay. We'll hear from our city manager about a recommended budget for fiscal year FY 2023. Fiscal year and FY mean the same thing.
So I'm going to work with the lapel mic a little bit, so if I'm turning my head, people can still hear me. Thank you for the opportunity to share this budget recommendation with you. We do that about this time each year in conformance with the city code, which sets out the process, which says that the manager will present a budget to council between the 1st and the 15th of April. Council has 45 days from the day that it's officially presented to you, which would be today, to take action. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about some of the planned discussion times, noting that the council can always decide to add additional meetings or special meetings along the way. I have the chore of summarizing 273 pages in a 12-page PowerPoint slide and the challenge of not reading it to you. So I'm going to try to not do that. As council is aware, each year as we begin the budget process, we start first with a review of the current budget, both where we are in terms of expenditures, unanticipated challenges, also a review of our revenues to see sort of our overall fiscal health, both long-term, of which each year is a part, and also short-term. I'm glad to share with you that our financial position, despite everything that we and that all the other local governments in our area have gone through in the last couple of years, our position remains strong, our overall financial position. And as council is aware from our periodic expenditure and revenue reports, we are expecting a small positive contribution to the general fund balance at the end of the year. Preparing a budget is never easy. There are many variables. We have to project not only what we think will happen between now and the 1st of July, but we have to continue that projection all the way through to January the 30th of the following year. We are challenged, as council is aware, and having to prepare a budget at a time of the highest inflation that we've seen in 40 years. Gas prices, when we wrote this, were over $4. Today I paid $3.99. Maybe that's a good sign, I don't know. As council is aware, the Federal Reserve has begun a series of interest rate increases. They've done one, they're talking about several more. We have a major European war. We hear folks on television and in publications talk about the possibility of a double-dip recession. And if that wasn't enough, the General Assembly has still not completed work on its budget. And as you'll recall, that is an important part of our overall budget as well as the schools. And we've all seen an increase in public and private sector challenges in recruitment and retention. We have, I won't say been immune for that because we certainly haven't here, but we are experiencing the same kinds of challenges as our neighbors. We are not immune to it. And as one of you said just a few minutes ago, we're a very small staff. So when we begin to lose several people in a department, that's a real challenge for us. And council is also aware, for example, the length of time it took us to successfully bring on a new finance director. It's taking longer. And in terms of retention, some of both private and public sector other entities are enticing some of our people away, and they're harder to bring on their replacement. So those are things that make the preparation of this budget even more challenging than traditionally. As council is aware, and we've used these budget guiding principles for the last several years, and they're really a byproduct of our work together over the last 13. I would note somehow that this is the 13th budget I've had the pleasure of presenting in the city of Poquoson. So we always start with the desire to keep our property tax rates, both real estate and personal property, stable, if at all possible. And this budget does that. In addition, as council will recall, at your last meeting, you took action to actually reduce the personal property ratio from 100% of value to 90% of value for this tax year, which again is both the June collection, which affects this fiscal year, and the December collection, which will be in the upcoming fiscal year. There is tremendous volatility in the personal property values. We may well find ourselves, like we did this year, with some version of escalated values next year as well, next calendar year, at which point we'll come back to you and talk about whether or not the overall budget is in a position that we can do something perhaps similar to this, or maybe a different way to accomplish the same objective. We have, over the course of my time here, really focused on doing the things that we have traditionally done well, at the service levels that we have traditionally done, rather than focusing on adding programs or substantially increasing service levels. It's very seldom do we have that type of available revenue. This year is no different for many of the reasons that I'd outlined before. As always, the council's adopted financial guidelines are the central pillars upon which we build our financial plan. That is no different than is always the case. Here's one which I've spoken to it a little bit, but I'll sort of close it up from the other direction. We've given you our best recommendations based on our revenue and expense projections through March of 2022, with things like recessions and things like the General Assembly not completing their budget all in front of us. And as the council knows, we will, as city staff, carefully monitor our fiscal condition, and should there be a need to take action, as this council has in the past, to make sure that our ship remains righted, and that our financial position remains strong. We'll be back to you with recommendations and options, as we did as we approached the beginning of the public health emergency and at other times during my tenure here. We traditionally try to limit new initiatives, in part because we don't have a very robust new revenue growth from which to add things, but we do focus instead on making sure that with the budget that we can continue to do the things we are doing without starving ourselves to do them. Meaning we sometimes need to increase slightly or even moderately some of our expenditures to continue to do what we've been doing, and that's the focus here. In terms of the general fund, the available additional funds beyond what are needed for the base budget are focused, and I'll talk about it in a minute, really on compensation increases for city staff, but also school employees as well. As council is also aware, after we move from the guiding principles, we have a series of strategic focus areas. These were developed over time with input from budget work sessions, from budget retreats, and other things with the city council. And I would say right up front that the number, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, is not necessarily indicative of its ranking, because they're all important, but you got to call one. So we start with public education. There are 2 or 3 things to bring to your attention here. First, the budget as recommended fully funds the superintendent and school board's requested budget of us. One thing that is different is, as the school board was working on its budgets with the superintendent, is when we really saw the acceleration in inflation. So what this budget recommendation does is not only does it fully fund the school's recommendation for a 5% compensation increase for their employees, but actually adds money equivalent to an additional %. And with inflation projected to be 6 to 8% for the 12-month period beginning, it was February on, this is not an outlier in terms of percentage. Additionally, as council is aware, this community receives significant federal monies through the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, and the recommendation is to use some of our, we have, as council will recall, we have sort of discretionary, we have flexible money and not flexible money. And the not flexible money has a series of requirements that must be met, and things like HVAC system upgrades to promote healthy buildings is something that qualifies. And so you'll see on page 245, 246 of the budget, there is a recommendation, which is almost $2 million, to assist the school system in their planned HVAC system upgrade project for the primary school. So 2 significant priorities in the budget, and they're both here: compensation for school employees and an investment in the primary school, whose HVAC system has, to the extent that it was ever put in, has very much run its useful life. Strategic focus area 2. The first of the 2, and again, all these numbers don't necessarily can also translate to order, but the first, as council is aware, is a budgetary recommendation. It is in 2 places in the budget. It is a combination. It is proposed to be a combination of 2 funding sources. One, the significant majority, over 90% majority of our flexible federal ARPA money, and also about $3.6 million in debt fund for a total project budget for the public safety building of $12.8 million. A couple of points about that. Council will recall at the request of City Council about 3 years ago, following its inclusion in the comprehensive plan, that the city look at a consolidated public safety building for police, fire admin, and an emergency operations center. we went about it, your direction, in doing a space needs analysis feasibility study, which was presented to council approximately 2 years ago. With the increase of the federal money, this project became something that might be possible without having to raise taxes to pay any additional debt. And the debt that is suggested here is a small enough amount that it would not in itself trigger a tax rate increase. But so what we've got here is the recommendation from those two funding sources to move forward with this building. Secondly, and this one, it doesn't require a caveat, but it's a placeholder for, it needs to be added on to something else. This budget also recommends a special pay adjustment. I'll talk about general pay adjustment in a couple of minutes. The special pay adjustment would be for all sworn public safety personnel in recognition of how quickly the market for police, fire, EMS is changing in Hampton Roads and in our area as well. So there will be a recommendation later for a general compensation increase. And so to use this budget, it's for public safety folks, it's both. It's not one or the other, it's designed to be both. Particularly, and you've read about it, I'm sure, in the newspapers lately, communities in our area, the most notable one, the one that I saw the statistics on just recently was the city of Norfolk. Not that we are in Norfolk, but we are in the same region. They have 279 police vacancies, if I remember the newspaper story from last week correctly. There is a heck of a lot of competition for police officers, and that also translates, again, to fire and EMS. So my suggestion here, my recommendation is that in addition to the general pay adjustment, that for public safety officers, we add an additional 1,000. Third, quality of life. At a time where we don't have always ongoing additional money to get beyond those base things, plus taking care of our employees and school employees, we don't often put these types of things specifically in an adopted budget. We look throughout the year, and sometimes with your consent and authorization, we are able to make limited investments from either our fund balance, our debt fund, even our current year operating budget, depending upon the periodic revenue and expenditure reviews. And so I just wanted to point out, while there's nothing specific in the budget, in the last year going through to the end of this calendar year, there are just a number of things that I think the public would be interested to be reminded of. First, again, kind of in no order, but first was the significant investment City Council made this past summer with the acquisition of new park property off of Kelsler Drive. In the last year, the council has also made investments in permanent restroom facilities at South Austin Park, completed the sidewalk connector projects between our two school complexes. You have approved money to do some badly needed renovation and repair at our pool, and as well as making some smaller investments. We have done 2 micro parks, actually 3 micro parks in the last year, and the next one is planned for in front of Wendy's. We hope to get that done sometime in the next few months. And as council will recall, because you approved this, we've removed the unsafe bleachers that were at Messick, and the process of putting in new ones with your support. 4, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and Councilman Huck spoke to it as well as several of you with regard to the previous discussion. I believe, and I know that you believe as well, that our employees, both schools and here in the city, are really the cornerstone of how we provide government and how we serve the people of this city. And in the face of a projected 6 to 8% annual inflation, and as already indicated, some significant and increasing pressure that we have competing for new employees and also to retain employees, this budget recommends that a general wage increase, that means every full-time employee, that includes public safety, of 5% plus $1,500. That $1,500 is a permanent wage adjustment, not a bonus. And I would note to you that that's very similar to what was recommended in both York County and James City County for their employees. They may be tweaked a bit as they go through their budget process, but that is essentially exactly what those two localities did, with the one exception of the $1,000 additional for sworn public safety. Now, I'm aware that they may tweak it as they go through the process, but my point in bringing that up to you is just demonstrate we're not market outliers in this, and there certainly are communities that are doing more than this as well. Lastly, this is always one of our focus areas, which is fiscal stability. We make sure that we don't overextend ourselves. We are careful to not count on one-time revenues to support ongoing expenses. We are mindful of the out-year costs of things that we may do in the short term. We remain, as always, in compliance with your adopted fiscal management guidelines. And as you'll recall, a couple of years ago, the council made its, I should say final, it's not really final, but it is our final deposit in our fiscal stability fund, which council had established at a rate of up to $1 million. It remains at $1 million. We may over time want to increase that further, but we remain there, and we continue to do everything necessary to maintain our AAA bond rating. A couple of additional things to bring to your attention and really to the public. Fiscal stability during a time of COVID meant additional things. This council made appropriations 6-7 months ago to both the Social Services Department and the United Way, both of whom would and are offering COVID-related assistance to our citizens. So we created, or we helped to fund those support efforts, as well as appropriated additional funds to our Economic Development Authority to provide business assistance for those businesses that are struggling with the same public health emergency. So you appropriated significant money. It was federal money coming out of ARPA, but nonetheless, you appropriated significant money for not only to maintain our fiscal position, but hopefully to also assist our citizens and our businesses as well. So, in conclusion, it's been a difficult 2 years. Few of us have any experience with a public health emergency that doesn't seemingly go away, although it seems to be going away, he says with great caution. But it's not gone away yet, and its impacts on our economy, both nationally and here in the city and in our region, continue to change. But you know, we were prepared, not so much for this, but we were prepared. It was one of the lessons that we all learned together coming out of the 2008-2009 recession, was we needed to strengthen our financial position, and we did that, and we took actions working together to continue to maintain that strength even through the challenge. And at this point, we are stronger than when we started, and that didn't happen by accident, and that really happened as a result of council leadership working with staff. So as we look at this budget, as we conclude, there are really a few focuses. It's really on investment. It's focusing on our ability to attract and retain a high-quality workforce, both our own and our school system. And so that's what I call sort of a short-term and continuing investment, as well as making longer-term investments in our community, whether it's the middle school complex and all the things that we have done there and are continuing to do, you know, with the middle school itself, investments in the athletic facilities, et cetera, the the public safety building, which again came through the comprehensive plan all the way through to council at this point, and the investments in the primary school HVAC system. So we're making both continuing and longer-term investments. A couple more slides and I'll stop talking. Key dates moving forward. As we do each year, even in the COVID years, we did this next thing, although with not everybody in the room, but we do traditionally the joint session with the school board. Typically, following that, we have our own companion work session as a city, and then the public hearing on the budget is the 25th. The scheduled budget adoption is May 9th. That doesn't mean you have to do it by that time, but you do need to do it within 45 days of today. So if there is a need to schedule additional work sessions and/or a special session to continue budget deliberations, we stand ready to help in any way we can. Last slide, for those watching at home, if you would like to look at the budget, it's 273 pages. You can find it on our website right there. There are hard copies available in the library. There are copies available in City Manager's office as well as the Finance Department's office as well. And though we're not the custodians of the school budget, if anyone would like to see the school budget, there are copies available in the Superintendent's office as well. And with that, I will stop talking. Thank you for your time. Thank all the department heads and the finance team, as well as the superintendent, for all of their help in getting to this point. And tell you that we look forward to working with you over the next several weeks as you do your budget deliberations. And sort of finally, just to say that should you have questions, staff and I are available to meet with you and to talk about any questions that you may have. If you would start with Lee, and then Tanya and I will come in to be part of those conversations as may be helpful. And that's all I have, sir.
All right, Randy, thank you very much. It's well done. Great presentation. You mentioned several times in your presentation about council. Let me just say this to you and to your team, Lee and Christy and Kim and Tanya, your department heads as well. You folks are the ones that make this city run. You're the ones that cause us to be recognized on a map. Any meetings that you and I attend, there are always questions about how in the world do you guys do this? And we do it because of you and your team, our department heads, and certainly all of the staff. So, even though you want to give us credit for all of the things you said that we've done, it all goes to you guys. You're certainly deserving of it. Backing up to the COVID process, what a tremendous effort was put on by the city of Poquoson, joining with Hampton. We were probably some of the very first people that had all of our school teachers, all of our employees vaccinated way ahead of many other areas that you and I see as we travel around the peninsula. Our schools, we're in the process of finishing, I think. Renovation of the middle school certainly looks nothing like it did when I was there, which wasn't yesterday, but it's significant that we talk about, we got a brand new school for all intents and purposes that I'm not sure the public really knows about, to be honest with you. Not because we haven't put it out there, but there's some things the public just doesn't pay any attention to. But if they were able to watch this presentation, then they see the work that goes on behind the scenes every day to try to make this a better place. And as one gentleman mentioned tonight, it's not about legacy. Got nothing to do with legacy. I don't mean any harm towards the gentleman, but I just thought that was a comment out of place. It didn't go over well with me. I don't know about the rest of you. But anyway, you did a good job tonight, Randy.
Thank you.
And you do a good job throughout the year. I can't believe you made it 13 years. How'd that happen?
I don't know.
Oh, well.
That was one of the questions you all had 13 years ago.
Yeah.
You were concerned that I might not stay too long, and now you may be concerned that I've overstayed my welcome. I don't know.
Never.
Not that, no.
Never.
All right, assuming that there are not a lot of questions for Randy, are there any other comments from you, sir?
No, sir.
If not, are there council directors? Jana?
I just wanted to thank you, Mayor, for letting the people speak and not having a time limit on them. I know there's lots of places where minutes. I've been spoken to other boards here myself where I was given a time limit, and I think that's very gracious that we give our citizens the ability to speak and are willing to stay here and listening to them. I wanted to thank the citizens for coming out to speak. I think it's important when you care about an issue that you come and speak to us. I hope as a city council we meant what we said with David's motion, that we will look into this, that we will gather more information, that we will respond to the York County Board of Supervisors, and that this won't just die, because I think the citizens that came out tonight made it very clear that they at least want us to investigate this. They at least want us to gather some information. And I think it's important that we listen to them and that we do just what they asked, which is, can we, on this? So I hope that we do follow through on our motion and that we do that. I just want to say that I did not take offense to anything that anybody said. I feel like when people spoke tonight, when they talked about bureaucracy or some of the comments they made, I don't think it was meant with ill intent. I didn't take it that way myself personally. I thought they were very respectful. I don't think that they had any intention of criticizing our city staff or us as a council. I think they were very gracious in their words and thanked us multiple times for what we do. And so I wanted to say again how much I appreciated all the citizens' words tonight.
Okay, Kerry?
I basically agree with Jana, and also the fact that we don't put people on a time limit, I think is one of the great things about this council, because we're one of the few that doesn't. Some places have a big clock up there, and it's more important to watch the clock than it is to listen to the people that voted for you to put you up here at this table. So I think what we do is just really good.
Okay, good deal. Keith?
Ditto to what Janice said, and I just appreciate having the work session where the people can see us talking about what the issues are, that we aren't completely blind. We know what we're talking about at least as good as we can, and move forward from there.
Okay, buddy.
The one thing I disagree that Janice said, I did take offense to what the gentleman said about bureaucracy. I think he did mean that derogatorily, and I was dismayed at it, and I agree with David, and I'm glad he corrected it. I think we've got one of the best staffs in the whole wide world, and I hope none of you took it personally, the comments that gentleman made. So that's it.
Thank you, buddy. Dan?
Thank you, Gordon.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick comment. I don't say things I don't mean. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So move it.
Well, I'm sorry, bud. I keep forgetting that you're out there, pal.
All right, thank you, Gordon. First off, if I got out of order anytime, I apologize, but the audio cut in and out, and apparently there's a lot that did not come through on the phone, okay? But I second all the positive comments about our city manager and the staff, okay? There are none finer, okay? All the comments that everyone has made, okay, are absolutely true about our city staff. And I do appreciate the people who participated in the meeting tonight. I don't know about some of the comments. After the meeting, I'd like for either you or Randy to give me a call to tell me about the things I missed. Because obviously I missed something between the audience of visitors and approval of the minutes, and then the sound went away, and the next, I caught the bids, and then after that it went away, and the next thing I heard was David's comments about the amendment for the consideration of the letter. And so I missed a bunch, but Thank you very much, and y'all have a nice night.
Hope you feel better, Bud, and I will call you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Did we have the motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made, second to adjourn. Ms. Kim?
Councilwoman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Bye?
Aye.
Councilman Southall?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman?
Aye.
Councilman Hucks? Councilman Green?
Aye.
Mayor Hessel? Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
Don't give me that.